to really understand something like critical mass, it's essentially a collective phenomenon. It's not an individual act, not some great man in history who thought it up, or a great woman for that matter. But that is how we tend to look at things, and the media really forces us into that bottleneck as well. But it's just false when it comes to critical mass. There were dozens of people involved in conversations going on for years before it erupted from our community, our milieu in San Francisco. And then after we started it, and there was like 50 of us on the first ride, and many people were responsible for making it happen on that first event. It took off. It was incredibly euphoric. I'm sure everybody here has been in a critical mass, and you know how exciting and kind of magical it is. It's really not like anything else you've ever done in your life, and once you do it, it changes how you think about what the possibilities are, and that's one of the great treasures of it as a social experience. But for a lot of people, you can talk to anybody in a critical mass ride or around a critical mass ride, and you're going to get dozens and dozens of different perspectives on why somebody's there, what it means to them, what they care about, what motivates them. And a great number of people, it's about bicycling. And I'm, oddly enough, don't think that's true. I think that bicycling is clearly a piece of it, and it's partly because it gives us the ability to occupy social space in motion, which is difficult to do on foot. It's hard to have like a mass of people wandering through the streets and keeping it. I mean, you can do it in a demonstration, but the level of sort of novelty associated with a mobile swarm of bicyclists occupying the streets of the cities in 300 cities around the world, most police departments haven't figured out what to do about it yet. And some are co-opting it and are friendly, like I think you got that going here, and that's really what we want, because it's not about being angry in a protest, in my opinion. I know there are people who show up with that energy. It's about taking back public space. We live in a world in which everything that we do has been reduced to a series of transactions. The world is full of commerce. The most common way we interact with other human beings is by buying and selling things from them. And then, unfortunately, the most common relationship we have to the collective production of life is that we're for sale. We sell our own time and capabilities to produce the world that we live in, and it's a world we don't choose. Most of us would reject very many aspects of the world that we're living in technological choices, the direction of scientific research, the possibilities of more conviviality and more sociability that are denied us because of the kind of channels that we're forced to live in, the occupation of 20 to 40% of every urban space by asphalt for the purpose of housing private automobiles. Did you choose that? Did you? I didn't. And but yet we treat it as though it's some sort of a natural phenomenon. It just sort of happened to us. So the occupation of the public space in critical mass sets off a whole chain reaction of possibilities, because it changes your imagination about what a city could be like while you're rolling along in those streets during those moments. And you actually have all these surprisingly serendipitous encounters. You meet people that you may know or don't know, and you start talking, and you have an open-ended conversation, and you didn't have to buy a drink, you don't have to listen to pounding music, you don't have to feel like you're waiting for somebody else to buy something. It's just like you just have an unmediated moment of human experience. And let's face it, that's rare. That's become rare. And it's also a slowing down, because we actually have time during a critical mass for 2 or 3 hours, and you have even more of that on a car-free day, to just be there without any further thing to do. And so much of our life has been instrumentalized. Everything has to be about something else. And so for a lot of people, critical mass, what have you achieved with critical mass? What are your demands? And it's just like, no, exactly, that does not compute. And for people that you say that to, that doesn't compute for them, because they can't really understand something that doesn't have an instrumental purpose. And critical mass has the only purpose is to be. It's to be a space in which things happen, and communities start to find. I think the exciting part is that people start to find each other in public space. As Matt Hearn puts it, is we start making common space. And if you haven't read his book, Common Ground in a Liquid City, I highly recommend it. It's a very good book. So taking that kind of sensibility that's somewhat anti-commercial and pro-human interaction outside of the logic of commerce, and applying it then to your car-free day experiences. Street fair in San Francisco started in the 70s. It kind of came out of the remnants of the 60s movements and communities. And it only took about 2 years for it to turn into an alternative mall. It's just like all the people with their jewelry and their necklaces and their leather belts and their CDs and their tie-dyed T-shirts and everything. And every street fair throughout the city, which is supposed to be super rooted in the community, is exactly the same. You go there and it's the same range of people selling gyros and hot dogs, and it's unbearable. And you go out there, it still is, it's a public space, and you can get drunk with your friends, and it's fun for that reason. But it doesn't live up to its possibilities. It's actually really sad to what extent it hasn't taken on another dimension. Sunday Streets, in the first one that we had, was so magical because nobody was really filling the space up with that logic yet. It wasn't all just about bringing out your merchandise and selling it, even if you're an alternative producer. And instead, surprisingly, there was a number of moments where people instead chose to give things away. So people were handing out bottles of water at one spot. I actually had a guy come up to me who was so euphoric, he handed me a big fistful of marijuana, not even knowing if I wanted it or not. But he's just like, here, man, this is cool. And I was really pleased by that. And I started talking about this yesterday and the previous times here in Vancouver that I've been, because I think one of the challenges for us who are involved with producing these kinds of spaces is how to shift them away from the inevitable descent into being just another space for commerce, because that's really going to take over. Probably Sunday Streets already has a dominant feeling of that for a lot of people. I don't know. I haven't been here yet, so I look forward to it tomorrow. But I'm interested in figuring out how can we create other logics in which we interact with each other and begin to create a life that displaces commerce in the same way that bicycling and critical mass displaces cars. Like there's a logic there that we need to get better at expanding, and a way of talking about it too, where we start to have a better idea of, but what do you do when you're not shopping for things and consuming things? Nothing. I don't do anything. That's all I do. And isn't it funny that a lot of us might draw a blank on the first thought? So, maybe it's a matter of having giant chess matches in the street or having jousting or whatever. I mean, there's so many things that could happen that aren't about buying and selling. But just to say, well, there's bigger implications here about reorganizing life. And then the big part of that for me, and a lot of what I've been writing about for years, I did this magazine, Processed World, back in the 80s. And out of that sensibility that started then, all the way 30 years later, I wrote a book called Nowtopia. The subtitle's How Pirate Programmers, Outlaw Bicyclists, and Vacant Lot Gardeners Are Inventing the Future Today. Because my argument is that we live this bifurcated life. When I first had to get a job, when I dropped out of college back in 1980, I had one real skill: how to handle information. So what a lot of people get when they have a liberal arts education. So what do? You look for places that need you to handle information. Banks, insurance companies, real estate offices, and San Francisco's full of them. So I was working in what we knew then as the abusement park of San Francisco's financial district, and looking around at other people that looked kind of like me. And it was like, well, what are you doing here? I don't work. I'm just here for a little while. I just need the money. I'm not actually an office worker. I'm actually a historian. I'm actually a philosopher. I'm actually a dancer. I'm actually a photographer. And there's all these things that we are that are not what we do when we're working for money. And that bifurcation characterizes most of our lives. And so I'm really interested in figuring out how we can expand the realm in which we're not working for money, but we are doing the work that matters. Because it's often the case that most of the work we do, I would actually argue, go out on a limb with this and say that maybe 70% of the work our culture does on a global scale is a waste of time, and it should stop tomorrow. Banking, real estate, insurance, advertising, military production, the production of shoddy goods that last for 6 months instead of for 75 years. All the things you go down, even the good work, teaching, medicine, doctoring, nursing, that kind of stuff, is completely compromised by its embeddedness in stupid bureaucratic life. So that a great deal of what people doing good work, like doctoring or teaching, are doing is serving the needs of a bureaucracy rather than what they were originally motivated to learn how to do that for. So we have to really come to grips with this, what I call the greatest public secret in our lives: work. We don't even talk about it. Basically what's happened is that we're all middle-class people, right? We no longer think of ourselves as workers. And yet, I would venture to guess every single person in this room has to trade a good part of their life for money in order to pay their bills. That's the definition of a proletarian right there. And so when you have to sell yourself to work, you lose control over what you do. You do what you're told, or you don't have a job. It's that simple. And it may be that you chose to do a certain profession, and you're even given a lot of autonomy on the job because you're very capable and you're technically skilled, and they want you to decide how to do it. And that's all fine, but there's never a moment where we as a society decide, well, what work should we do? And what work should we get rid of? Because it's really destroying the planet and destroying our well-being. Doesn't even come up, right? And everybody, it sounds like I'm a nutcase for bringing it up, right? Just right off the bat. What is he talking about? And so this bifurcated life, then, I think, is really one of our great challenges, in that what we find is when you're not doing your dumb job, not that everybody's job is dumb, but an awful lot of them are. And let's face it, they say this is a high-skilled culture now. We all have to have all this training and technology. It's like jobs are stupid. You can learn them in an hour, maybe a week. almost every job is pretty fast to learn, and then it's like anybody can do it, and you can do it over and over again, and it's really easy. The real challenge is when you bring your full humanity to bear on a task, on something you're interested in doing because you chose it. And what you find is that all this work people do when they're not in their jobs is the real work that needs to get done. So it's reappropriating the technosphere. People are taking technologies and reappropriating them and thinking of new ways to use them. They're using the waste stream of capital. I mean, how many bicycles get thrown away in this culture? And then there's all these DIY bike shops that have emerged not just in North America, but in Mexico and in Brazil and Guatemala and Italy and all over Europe now too. So this has been this surge from below, really planetary-wide almost, that says we're going to take the waste stream and we're going to do something useful with it, and we don't really care if we make money from it, because we're not only going to be creative and artistic in the appropriation of that waste stream and make it useful to people, but we're also going to share the skills that it takes to do that with each other for free, just in that same kind of free software sensibility where you just say, well, you need to know how to do it, here, let me help you, And I've gone to these bike shops, and I'm so non-mechanical, it's laughable. And I'll go in there with a broken bicycle when I first discovered them, and I'll say, can you fix my bike? And they look at me and go, no, we don't fix bikes here. I was like, what? No, we don't fix bikes, but we'll show you how to fix your bike. Come on in, put it up on the rack, and we'll start working on it. And if you need help, we're here to help you, and here's the tools, and here's the parts. Help yourself. So I started learning to do it a little bit myself, and then I looked to who's working next to me on either side, and it's like this 14-year-old black kid on one side, there's 3 Latino kids on the other side, and it's typically a lot of times kids, because that's who's really attracted to that kind of autonomous workshop space. And when do I ever have a conversation with those people? Never. And suddenly we're now friends. We're talking about tech talk. It might be kind of boring. Like, you got that cable, you got that brake pad, not so interesting. But then maybe we start talking about, well, have you been to that part of town? Did you see that cool place to ride to? Did you know what used to be there? It used to be an ammunition factory or whatever. There's a million ways that you can start connecting with people in a broader way. And so I think it's in those organic communities that form around sharing technology and sharing skills and sharing this new way of engaging with the technosphere broadly understood, and the waste stream of capital, whether it's vacant lots or it's thrown away materials or what have you. New communities are beginning to emerge, and new communities that are actually, curiously enough, organized around work, around doing something that's actually useful, that we've all chosen to do, not because somebody's paying us, but because it makes sense, makes good sense, and it's fun. And so there's a logic there that we need to be better about understanding and appropriating, and a lot of it's based on cooperation, mutual aid, and solidarity, famous old values that a lot of us still hold and wish there was more of in our lives. And interestingly enough, a lot of people who are doing these things, they don't really think about them politically that much. They don't see themselves as engaged in political activity while they're involved in those things. And yet it's a super political activity. It's as political as you can get. And in that space, then, something new emerges that ultimately we can hope might be the foundation for really challenging the edifice of our lives and the way things are set up.
This innovative polling system, when realized, will become a potential tool to enable us, the citizens, bring about whatever social change is needed.
Perpetual participation, or ongoing polling, is essentially what direct democracy is all about.
So there's this kind of bizarre thing in which we all became middle class somewhere along the way, which shifted our sensibilities in a deep sense over a period of time, away from thinking about ourselves as social agents, as people who can take action in history at the point of production where we work, and instead it's all about when we're shopping. So all of our energy has gone now to looking at sort of politics of consumerism and being kind of fundamentally tisk oriented. It's like, oh dear, you're eating the wrong food. Oh dear, you're buying the wrong clothes. Oh dear, you're buying products that come from the wrong place. And it's all this endless guilt tripping and fear of doing the wrong thing. And it's like a horrible politics. It absolutely paralyzes people, and for a great number of people it's like, no way, I don't want to hear about it, stop talking to me about it, I'm done, flip it off, and I'm just going to buy whatever I want, because really accountability is what's missing.